who we truly are and the power that's within us that has been somewhat forgotten and I think waits within our DNA and waits within the Akashic records of our mind, that we are here almost at this tipping point.
Today's guest is MatthewLaCroix, one of the world's leading researchers on ancient history and ancient civilizations. This one is a banger.
This is so much bigger than rocks. This is so much bigger than just some dusty stuff that we can uncover in some part of the world. This is the very origins of who we are and the divine nature of what we've forgotten. It's a higher vibration. It's a higher frequency.
Matt's newest revelations have practical applications for all of us. The secrets of the universe are being unveiled.
We're moving into another time when these mysteries are being unlocked because it's time for that.
Leave us a like, comment down below. Check out 𝗦𝗂𝗯𝘀𝗁𝗏.com. Exclusive stuff for all of you. Exclusive videos from MatthewLaCroix. We will see you guys later. Check out our Rumble and subscribe. Did I say that? Yes, I did. Enjoy the podcast. See you later.
𝗦𝗂𝗯𝘀𝗀𝗯𝗏.
Everyone, welcome MatthewLaCroix back. Matt, the superstar, as he continues to climb the world and take on things. A lot has changed since you were here with us last time, but as always, my friend, welcome. How's it going?
It's great to be here with Will. I always love our conversations. You're one of my favorite people to talk to. So we have a lot to go over. I just got back from a whole scouting trip with part of the team to Turkey. And we got to go to some absolutely incredible places as the beginning framework of a larger documentary and larger sets of expeditions and future work that deals with uncovering what I believe is really the missing key of the origins of these lost civilizations around the world.
Yes. And because of that, we spent our last podcast discussing what was potentially the very first cross ever symbolized. And now that you've had a chance to go there, be a part of it, see some stuff, does this change your theory? Has things changed? Are you more confirmed with this belief now that you've seen it, or how are you feeling about it?
You know, it's interesting when you combine, of course, spending an enormous amount of time at your computer and just looking at everything you can, right? From the digital standpoint, you say, well, I still haven't been there yet, though, right? I still haven't gotten there and looked at it over, analyzed it in front of me and in front of my eyes. And I will tell you, if anything, going to 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗙 locations that we were visiting, and there was some others as well, like Vaughan Museum and some other places. But going to those places, not only did it have more of that wow and amazing factor, for instance, like the altar that you don't get the chance to see really in any depictions at all, right below the cross. But there's all kinds of things we could talk about with that. But that experience was certainly one of the most magical, powerful experiences I've ever had, was specifically going in to the inner sanctum of Ayanis. Now, if anybody listening to this is wondering where all that footage is, we were not able to film inside during the first part of the scouting trip. We were not able to film inside the inner sanctum of Ayanis, including with the altar. And so I can only talk about that and the experiences we had, but we actually were not able to capture that. So it'll be more of a verbal discussion for now, but we will be going back in the later part of August to do the actual filming and to go back with all of the experts combined, including archaeologists and geologists that were not part of this original trip, to do the actual analyzing and capturing and doing the next level of exploring and investigating in this great mystery. Because what we saw there, it truly defines our entire understanding of lost civilizations. You cannot see what you can see at some of these sites anywhere in the world. And what I mean by that, Will, is take all the archaeological sites in the world, right? Take Göbekli Tepe, go to places where like they're still doing some excavations outside of the Valley Temple of Egypt, or Tanis, or different locations like outside of Sacsayhuaman or Ollantaytambo in Peru. Right, doesn't matter. Like, let's pick these different areas that have important lost civilization evidence. They're almost always roped in. They have rope systems coordinating them off for where they're excavating, and you walk around and you look at them, right? You see, oh, well, this is excavated. It shows it's sticking out. It shows it's been taken out of the ground, or it's sitting there, but it's at least everything's been uncovered around it, right? Well, in Turkey, it could not be more different. And in fact, obviously, as you're listening to me talk about this, it'll bring up greater questions about why these things are the way they are. But I'll give you an example: is 𝗃𝗃𝗁𝗂𝗂 that I call Kef Temple. Khelessi is a word that means fortress, which is not at all what these things were. But I want to point out that experience, just for a moment, putting aside Ayanis and the first cross, and 𝗪𝗪𝗂𝗃𝗃𝗁𝗂𝗂, just the experience of Kef alone, was unlike really any site you could really see outside of maybe some of the war-torn areas of Syria or Iraq, where you still have somewhat unexcavated wild places where you still have to try to get out to, and they're hard to get to, and there's important artifacts that can still be found. Outside of Syria and Iraq, I think this is the only sites in the world that you can see unexcavated places with real artifacts that are still there, and real places that are still part of like that almost Indiana Jones like mystery and exploration. But the difference between these and Syria and Iraq is that you have the remnants of giant megaliths. So imagine beautiful stonework like you see in Egypt or Peru or Bolivia, but it's in a place that is unexcavated, sticking out of the ground. It looks like almost like if you were to go visit some alien world, right? And you stepped out of your ship and then you saw the ruins of a civilization that hadn't been touched in thousands of years, and it was sitting there. That's what it felt like. That's what these experiences felt like, because of various different reasons of the time period of 1950s and 60s when these are excavated, and how it was just after World War II. And I've been told a lot of different things by archaeologists and others about not good funding during that time, or just lack of interest, or maybe even a deeper side of it about what they actually realized they found. And then it was more like a hush hush, let's just leave that and not go any further with it. There's a lot of speculations and things we could go in that avenue. But I will tell you that those sites and the adventures, like Kef Temple, we hiked 2.5 miles to get into it. 2.5 miles up a completely wild mountaintop, where you could just sprain your ankle and hurt if you get hurt, and there's no one around. There's no one there to help you. These were real expeditions, real places where we actually had to leave 𝗃𝗃𝗁𝗂𝗂𝗃 early because we had big storms rolling in, and we were so high up that we were really worried about lightning strikes. So we had to actually abandon and head back down once we were after about an hour and a half or so being up there. So there's a lot left to still explore and see. But the scouting trip certainly provided me with an absolute wonder and amazement, and lots of very important photographs and documentation, and seeing these very rare and unusual ancient sites around the world that I believe, after everything I've studied, and even more so after being there, is that these symbols, these divine symbols, these motifs, these artifacts that are left behind actually play one of the most important roles in the ancient world that we have not recognized. And we're going to go over some of those symbols and those motifs today, and some of those artifacts that I think are truly part of what I'm calling a missing key of history, and which is what the name of the new book that I'm deep into will. I'm very happy about the very good beginning and the start that I have into it right now. So I'm deep in that book of really laying out all these connections from ancient Sumer, the ancient Sumerians in the last city of Shuruppak, all the way to the story that connects Lake Van with what I'm calling the Ararat civilization, all the way through these global connections, these global things around the world. And so that's what I'm deep into right now.
So for the people that don't have a good understanding of what Ayanis is and where it is, can you maybe just break that down?
What we're talking about today is these sites like Ayanis and Kef and 𝗪𝗪𝗂𝗃𝗃 are three very important sets of temples that sit around Lake Van. And they are what I believe is the best evidence we have for a civilization that has been previously unknown and not identified, that the Urartians came thousands of years later and built right on top of. And there's a lot of confusion with those two. And we're going to, of course, we can break all of that down. But for those you were asking about Ayanis and what is Ayanis? Ayanis is the most important of those three temples. You could call it the primary, the most holy of all of these three temples. Not only that, but I think that 𝗓𝗡 and 𝗪𝗏𝗡𝗡 are proxy temples, nodal temples of Ayanis. Now, what Ayanis is it's a very unusual andesite temple. Andesite is a very hard type of volcanic stone that is built on top of a hill that overlooks the lake, and I believe it acted as a type of sundial, sun temple, where they have these buttress pillars, 4 of them on each corner, that represent as the sun moves across the sky, it's going to hit these pillars and create different shadows and angles, but only specifically will when the sun comes down from the west and starts to set. It literally sets right into the inner sanctum of Ayanis. That's called the 𝗪𝗟𝗿𝗏 temple. And within this inner sanctum, you have the first cross, I believe, in history, like the Knights Templar cross that became later, or the Maltese cross, the Red Cross. These are all later iterations of it. And then you have other things like this wing depiction of 𝗪𝗪𝗏 passing and then protecting this cross, with depictions like the sun symbols, like then the hourglass symbol, and all of these, like the griffin symbol, like we see as a protector symbol in the ancient Greek culture, which we can talk about some of the comparisons as we go along. But a lot of these very, very, very sacred, important symbols and motifs that are presented there that are literally laser cut in the andesite. If I was to say, and I've shown this to many archaeologists, I think I've had 3 different archaeologists that have said this statement. I say to them, have you ever seen a temple like Ayanis in the world? And they say, honestly, I've never seen anything like it. What's shown at Ayanis and the way that it's depicted and cut and designed, it's really stands in its own as a very unique type of megalithic temple. Let me tell you why, Will. Most megalithic temples in the world have shapes, polygonal blocks all fitted together. They're beautiful, but there's nothing carved in them, and there's no symbols usually in them at all. It's just blank. Like, give an example, the Great Pyramid of Giza. Nothing no writings and no symbols in that entire pyramid at all. The whole thing is just solid granite and all this, like, mysterious, like we don't have anything left there. Anything that's a depiction of hieroglyphs came from the dynastic Egyptian culture that came later. They would be like, the dynastic Egyptians would be just like the Urartians in this case, coming later, finding the remnants of this, sometimes writing into it or building on top of it. But Ayanis is very unusual because not only does it have writings in the cuneiform in the entryways that talk about, the grandness of 𝗪𝗪𝗏 and the grandness of the temple being built, but there are these bizarre symbols that are all carved within the andesite megalithic temple. Now, say megalith. Very important to understand. We're not talking about mud brick. We're talking about incredibly finely cut, massive andesite, and then on the lower walls coming up to the temple, basalt. But they're these hard stones that are cut perfectly, beautifully polished, and then laser cut are these symbols etched into it, okay, like laser cut. And in some cases, Will, it gets even weirder. Some places you have places where the blocks have joined together perfectly, like you can't fit a human hair between them, but the symbols that are cut seamlessly between the 2 blocks. Like,
wow. I got you.
Mind-blowing. Yeah. If we were to look at masons today, and I've talked to some masons today that have analyzed some of the symbol cuts in like 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀, because there's some down there as well, and have analyzed looking at Lake Vaughan with Ayanis, and they tell me today that to cut that, you would have to have laser-like technology, meaning that the more that we look at some of the ways that these are done, the more that it looks impossible it was even done by hand. So if we're looking at the Urartian civilization with their Iron Age tools, or even Bronze Age or Iron Age, doesn't matter what the ages are, it'd be impossible to not only manipulate, but to be able to cut in the type of accuracy and the type of and how perfect these are, it's clearly not Urartian. And that is part of a huge part of the movement of the team that I'm leading around the world, with archaeologists and scientists and experts and a lot of powerful individuals, actually, important people that are part of this, because it's so clear and identified at these sites that it's not Urartian. Because, Will, you can just very clearly see, take a site like Ayanis. You have this lower base of this spectacular temple, all these symbols and megaliths, and the floor is actually made out of calcite alabaster. It's absolutely incredible, and so is the altar. It's just the most beautiful temple you've ever gone in. The energy is unreal. Putting your hand on that alabaster altar, I've never felt energy ever like that. It's like you're literally feeling energy surge through your body, putting it on that. And I mean that. I can't say that lightly. But what I'm trying to say is, right above that andesite foundation, you see this huge area of Urartian mud brick. And it's eroded into this, almost decomposed and eroded into what looks like almost like a sand, or like a like barely visible with the mud bricks that have eroded into like a dirt. It looks like almost like a soil or a dirt, but it's actually just layers of the Urartian work. And for any of the experts or people that are asking about this, I asked the question, well, if the Urartians could build with the very hard andesite and basalt and do that beautiful stone masonry, then why did they never do that again?
Now, if there are all these sacred teachings and all these divine symbols, and they're all being connected by all of these great civilizations, many forgotten, that you're trying to help us get an understanding of, what do these divine symbols mean to us?
There's two components for the stone that is important first, I want to say, because it ties into all this. First thing is that andesite and basalt has some of the highest levels of magnetite within the stone. So the mineral structure of those stones has a lot of magnetite, which means there's magnetism properties. So energetically, there's something going on there that we don't fully understand today. The other thing is, being that hard, the stones could literally last to the end of time. So I think that there's two functions of these. One, they were very important for certain rituals and certain things that they were practicing, not sacrificing or anything like that, but it was energetic rituals relating to higher celestial things, relating to energies of the earth and the cosmos and higher consciousness. Okay. That's obviously where it was a big part of it, but why use some of the hardest stone in the world and put that there unless you truly wanted it to last the test of time, to be a monument that will survive so long in the future that even if humanity lost its way, it would have a way to come back and find its way home. I think that these symbols that are shown there are some of the most important symbols, arguably, in the world. The only thing that we're missing is like the flower of life, which honestly, the tree of life is presented here, and the flower of life is just like the golden ratio, perfect design of the universe outside it. So it's a related symbol anyway. But what we have here, as I mentioned, the first cross, I believe, in the world that came out of this. And some people be like, well, I get comments on this, and I want to mention, people are like, well, how hard is it to draw a cross? You just did two lines across each other. Not that kind of concept, not a primitive concept where someone's scratching things on a wall. How about a cross that is perfectly equidistant around itself to form a circle that has a very specific type of design of the cross, where it's not like the Christian cross that has it's not equal on each its axis. It's perfectly circular. So automatically you have a cross that's very different than what we see as like the Christian cross today. Something that was worn by the Knights Templar, and even today the Vatican, they still wear what's called the Red Cross or the Knights Templar cross. So it's like this proto-origin cross, but not a primitive cross. Something that's like the very beginning of a teaching, like an understanding that I believe was like lowered at Ayanis. I think what Ayanis represents is this point in time in history where divine knowledge was passed down at that spot. And that's the reason why, and I think in a real way, a celestial way, because 𝗲𝗏𝗏 is there. is being shown passing and protecting all these things at that site. And it seems like it's like a very, very holy, even amongst the sites itself, a place that should have the utmost respect, even entering in that kind of way. And so if you look at the cross at Ayanis, it represents this, as we know, like the 4 cardinal points, the 4 elements, but also this oneness in balance of all. And it also looks like the same depiction if you take a photon of light, Will, and you look at it under a microscope, it actually looks exactly like, if anyone has ever looked it up, a photon of light looks exactly like that cross. So really you're getting into questions, but like, okay, well, I guess they knew all of that. And this symbol was very specifically chosen because it seems like it's a symbol back to source and light and the connection to everything. Like this design of the universe in a greater capacity, like it's honoring that here.
𝗦𝗂𝗋𝗚𝗀.com, exclusive content and programs on manifestation, making money, hidden knowledge. Finally, reach your full potential.
It's very interesting how Ayanis is designed. It seems to be designed as a physical manifestation of teachings. So the actual temple and everything around it is a manifested set of physical structures that are based on an actual teaching. And I'll tell you why I say that. The cross has 4 corners, okay, 4. It's this concept of 4 that's there. And outside of the inner sanctum of Ayanis are these 4 pillars on each corner. 4 buttress pillars that have to do with the sun and energy. But it's 4. It's that concept of 4 there. Whereas at 𝗪𝗪𝗂𝗃 temple, you have the same temple, inner sanctum temple, what's left of it, but there are 3 pillars. And the pillars are the exact same design. They're not random pillars. They're not just a random shape. They're based on a very specific design of they're called buttress pillars. And they have this very specific type of design. You see that at 𝗪 too, but instead of 4, there's 3. 3 on each corner. Now, at 𝗪 temple, there was a giant artifact that I've shown you called the 𝗪 box relief. Now, it's called the 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙 𝗪𝗪𝗪 right below it. But it wasn't from there. It fell down from Kef Temple down towards that. That's why they called it that. So it's from Kef Temple. Now on that is arguably I would say the most important in terms of connecting symbols around the world besides the cross is really on that relief. And we don't know how it was housed, but it was originally housed in that temple and contained all these teachings on it. And what it contained is this concept of 3 doors at the top. And within the 3 doors, they're contained within a step pyramid. And the step pyramid has 3 levels, okay? And it's sitting above 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪, who's passing the seeds of knowledge from what I believe is the first chalice or cup. And if you look up what a chalice or a cup means, it means passing an important spiritual religious doctrine. So we know what he's passing. He's passing the knowledge of this, and he's passing it to the tree of life. And then above the tree of life are these 3 T-pillars, 3, with 3 indentations within it, with a completion. And then above that are these levels of 3 that etch out and build off into this concept. And you're looking at it and you're just like, wow, like all of these teachings. Now, what does that mean? Well, in Christianity, you have this concept of the Holy Trinity. And it's this idea, they call it the Father, Son, the Holy Ghost. But in spirituality, it wasn't called that. It was called the mind, the body, and the soul. And it's called the triptych. And it's this concept that's woven all around the world, especially South America. We see it, but we also see it in Saudi Arabia. We see it in Petra, Jordan, these doorways, okay? And it's in Mexico as well, Kukulkan's temple. And the concept is that there are 3 components of us that make up us. And I believe what it means is that if we can find balance, and I mean balance in all ways, with these 3 components, the central door unlocks. Now, what you'll see around the world, and we talked about it, Will, with the 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪 doorway, which is another in the same region, but instead of 3 doors, it's the concept of 3 doors, but within one. So, and that's something I really want to point out is when we see as an evolution of these concepts and these ideas into singular symbols in some places. And you'll see that in Tiwanaku, okay? You'll see that in Tiwanaku with when they condense some of the symbols down into three, into a single three. For instance, so a lot of people don't know, but if you know the gate of the gods, or the sun gate, the famous gate at Tiwanaku. Well, a lot of people don't know, but look at the backside. Don't look at the front. The front has one door, which it's etched in with three, by the way. There's three etchings in that front door. And it's got all those depictions on it of 𝗪𝗟𝗃𝗁. Well, I believe that 𝗪𝗟𝗃𝗁 is 𝗪𝗂𝗐, by the way, from here. But turn around the back side of the Gate of the Sun. Go look at the back. And I guarantee you, it's funny because I bet you a lot of people listening to this have never seen the back of the Gate of the Sun. Because if you type in the Gate of the Sun, the back is actually rarely taken. It's not as pretty. So people are like, oh, I want the pretty side. Well, but it has something the front doesn't have. It has three doors. The back actually has three doors etched in three, the same concept there. And so we start to see this concept being echoed around the world. Not only that, but the same T shape is in South America at a gate called the Gate of 𝗪𝗟𝗟𝗏 right there. And it's this T gate that's carved right into the giant sandstone cliff there that doesn't go anywhere. It's a false door. You like can walk up to it. And you're like looking at it. It doesn't do anything. Well, it's just like the 𝗪𝗪𝗏 gate. So I was just mentioning the 𝗪𝗪𝗏 gate is right next to Ayanis. It's actually in 𝗏𝗏, outside of the city of 𝗏𝗏, and it's up on this massive cliff. And we can talk about it, but it's basically a giant doorway, the same concept of these three within it, but it doesn't go anywhere. So clearly, we have a mysterious set of enigmatic symbols that seem to date back to a much older time, in which I believe the Urartians simply built on top of and incorporated in that. And then other famous people throughout history, like Alexander the Great and even Xerxes, visited Lake 𝗏. And in fact, Xerxes has a massive cutout of his inscription in the cliff at 𝗏 Castle, where he was talking about visiting and being an important place. So we know that this was an important place throughout history.
Would it be possible for us to deduce, let's say, in a slightly conspiratorial way, that those people and this knowledge, if they had it, which the common man does not now, and I don't know what the situation was in the ancient world, but what we always do right now is attach our elite to some sort of form of hidden understanding and hidden knowledge. And if they do have some understanding of what we are, who we are exactly, and how we're made up, could you deduce that they would be able to manipulate our reality or their reality, have benefits in some way just by understanding this knowledge? Or is there a practical application, rituals, meditations, understanding of astrology, where we are in nature? Do they have any understanding of those things that would allow you? And if that's true, would just you being able to discover this and unpack this the way that you're doing or that we're doing in this podcast for the common person, and if they gained that understanding, would they then be able to do something for themselves,
right,
or understand the world in a different way? That's my question.
I think without a doubt what we're looking at are the keys to unlock a door. And I mean, with this door, though, is metaphysical. This door unlocks the human potential, the greatest aspects of what we can become, the most powerful we can become. It's all laid out here. It's all look, this is how you do it. This is how you achieve it. It's all there. It's so explicit in how it's laid out. And that's why so many ancient civilizations around the world, like lost civilizations though, not Roman civilizations, like ancient pre-Inca, ancient pre-Egyptian, they put those symbols into their structures because they knew. And if that's what I would say, is it's an entire chapter of history when that was an accepted, promoted, and understood aspect of our reality. And it seems to be that's why they were designed all around the world. These temples and pyramids, I think there was a time frame that we have long forgotten when we were the greatest versions of ourselves we ever were, the greatest masters. And that time period in our history, that saga, that epic, was destroyed in violent catastrophes over a 1,500 year or more period, during the Younger Dryas period, which is why we essentially got knocked down to an Iron Age and lost everything, the iron and bronze, and lost everything that we used to know. And the reason I think what you said was really important. How could we have so much and then lose it all? There's got to be why wasn't the case that the survivors in the other cultures that came later found it and they'd be like, hey, everyone, look guys, look, this is it. This is it. Let's design our whole world around what they did. Let's do that. Let's design the same kind of temples. Let's embody the same symbols into our teachings. That's not how it went, though. That is not how it went. And you got to ask yourself, why? Why didn't it go that way? If the 𝗪𝗏𝗡ans found all these ancient symbols, why was it not embodied into their culture? Because I can tell you that all of their artwork, all of the stuff they depicted didn't have these symbols. They were war symbols. The 𝗪𝗏𝗡ans were a war culture. So they weren't respecting these symbols. They didn't care. Maybe some of the priests and sages of that culture within it did, which is why they would convince some of the leaders like 𝗪𝗟𝗏 II to build on these temples and keep them important. Yeah, obviously there's, like, in our society today, look at it. There's still a fragment, there's still a chunk that cares about ancient stuff, that cares about spirituality, cares about human consciousness, but how big is that chunk? How big is that chunk in the overall scheme of all of us? Well, maybe it's the same as back then. Maybe back then, because our world was focused on a totally different thing, it was war empires. It was accumulation of resources and power and might. It seems to be a later epoch of our civilization went through that. That's what they went through. And so that to them, those symbols weren't important. With that mindset, Will, I want to take you to, there is a site that I found 425 miles northwest of Lake Vaughan. Completely like you wouldn't expect it. And it's exactly the same builders. I guarantee it. And in fact, it's a replica of Ayanis, a replica. The world doesn't know about this one yet. The reason I'm bringing this one up is that there'll be a lot of research and a lot of work on this because I think it proves that they became a maritime civilization and shows their migration routes and how big they became. But more importantly on that, this site became one of the most important sites to the Holy Roman Empire. So the 𝗪𝗏𝗡ans were there and then they disappeared. And then the Holy Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire in Turkey, came through and they found it. And they knew it was really important. And they built right on top of them, they built some of the most important chapels and temples in the same area. And what does that tell you, Will? It tells you that they knew how important those were. And they knew about the knowledge. But what happened during the Roman Empire? Well, the Roman Empire transitioned during Constantine in Turkey from being a Western empire that was in Italy to collapsing and turning into the Byzantine Empire, people don't know, which became Turkey-based. That's why Constantine went to Istanbul, which was Constantinople before it changed names, and established the new Holy Roman Empire in Turkey. So it became the center of their civilization, and that's when I think they found all of these very important sites, including like Baalbek, Lebanon, which isn't in Turkey, but they built right on top of it, and all these other ancient symbols. Like that's where, for instance, the Nazis likely got the swastika symbol, came from an ancient symbol from Baalbek, Lebanon. They had nothing to do with what they did with it at all. It was an ancient symbol, just like a lot of these. Now, imagine though you have a time period. The Holy Roman Empire, they're adopting Christianity as their religion. They are rewriting history as we know it. We know that. We know that the Holy Roman Empire are the ones who wrote the established history books as we know it. They came out of different people in that time period, became the basis for where we get our narrative of history. And it came out of a religious understanding of the 6,000 year period that the Bible talks about with civilization. That's where that number came from. It was a biblical number that was woven into the Holy Roman Empire. And that's the basis for where we get our understanding of civilizations emerging 6,000 years ago. The problem is, I don't think they believed it. And I want to make that very clear. I think that Constantine and others very much understood this far more ancient history that existed, but they knew that it was dangerous because it came with, number one, no writings or anything is supposed to predate the Bible. So that's why, like the Council of Nicaea, they picked out very specific things that would go into become the Bible. But all these Gnostic writings, all these ancient pre-Egyptian stuff, they were destroyed and kept out, and a lot of them weren't used. And in fact, we know that they were being targeted for destruction. The Romans burned down the Library of Alexandria. Like we know twice. We know that targeting of more ancient knowledge was happening. So that's how I'm saying it's not an empty, baseless claim. We already know that was happening. So if you were going to rewrite history and you had all these symbols that could empower and unlock people, and you wanted to control them, which is what I think the Holy Roman Empire's goal was to control the masses and ideas and thought. And that just piggybacked off of where we are now. It literally is just empires transitioning and evolving into different states. I mean, it's like the Holy Roman Empire never died. It just changed and turned into like the U.S. Empire or something. I mean, whatever we want to call it. But the point I'm making is we think we're so sophisticated now in where we are with computers and technology, but I still think those things are hidden. I still think that there was an ancient understanding. Think about it. Why does Christianity use a sacrifice cross, but yet the Vatican and the Knights Templar had the original Ayanis cross? Why are they using a different cross? And that has a different meaning and a different symbology to it. That's really what you're bringing up these questions of what happened to all this. I think it was hidden. I think that this stuff was hidden because it would unlock the greatest aspects of us. And it was like, no, they can't, society can't have that. Let's keep it just in the elites, the priests and the great leaders and the spiritual leaders. Let's keep it just in a compartmentalized aspect in just that area. And I think that's what happened to our world.
One of the most important things that I have learned interviewing all of these high performance leaders is that clarity of mind is crucial to your success. And what good is clarity of mind without clarity of sound? Which is why today's podcast is sponsored by Rode. We across 𝗪𝗟𝗻𝗄 use exclusively Rode audio equipment in order to do all of our stuff. If you are an influencer, if you're just a person out there trying to make some good content for your stuff at home, wherever it is, Rode is by far the best audio partner we have ever had. We have been using their stuff for almost 5 years now. Has never let us down. Truly incredible company, especially with all of the other affordable things that you guys can get from them. Check out the link right down below and enjoy the rest of this podcast.
We haven't touched on something that I want to get into a little bit later, which is the, let's say, nuts and bolts aliens or true visitors. You've probably not come across anything that confirms that they were there, or maybe you have, but I want to get into, you said knowledge was passed down. We talked about it a little bit. Well, from who, how, why?
I think that without a doubt, the universe is a vast place. I always have to say this because I get yelled at. Obviously, the universe is a vast place, and there are like infinite planets and microbial and other life that undoubtedly exists throughout the universe. I mean, we know that, and maybe even hominid life. We don't know, and I think all of that is very much possible. But I do not think that the evidence we're seeing around the world and how we're viewing things like 𝗪𝗪𝗏, right? This winged god passing all this, it should be viewed through an extraterrestrial alien viewpoint. I don't. I think that actually causes more damage than it does good because it changes the mentality of how we view these things happening. I do not think that beings in a craft came down and taught humanity things. I don't think that's how it went. The more that I've really, really gotten into it, studying the greatest Assyriologist Sumerian experts, George Smith, Samuel Kramer, other geniuses, Austrian Henry Layard, these individuals that were trying to understand the Anuna, right, the Sumerian pantheon of gods, and how these fit into humanity, and how all of this knowledge coming from seemingly nowhere can give rise to entire civilizations. I mean, look at the Sumerians. They literally invented everything we can think of, from metallurgy, astronomy, mathematics, the first laws, the first writing, the first currency. You could go on and on. Everything was invented there, but they say that it literally just handed down to them. And it's handed down, it's this idea of kingship through this concept of what are called 𝗲s, 𝗲'S. I don't know if you've heard of those yet, but in cuneiform tablets like Enki and the World Order and others, you learn that the 𝗲s are like divine statutes. They're laws and rules and understandings of creating a civilization that are handed down to a culture. Okay? Now, that's the first thing you can say is, oh, well, clearly it didn't come from us. It was given to us. Well, then where did it come from? Well, this has been something that I've struggled with for well over 10 years to try to understand, what are the Anuna? What are they? What are they? Are they, again, what I've had to come to is that I think a lot of individuals have gotten maybe this area inaccurate. Do not think they're aliens that have come here. I think they're actually much more powerful than that, much more important than that, is every way they're described. Okay, they ordain the destinies of us. They watch timelines. They're somehow in charge of balancing, like maintaining balance on this planet. And that's where it gets wild. Looking at the altar at Ayanis and looking at what the Keph box relief is showing, they seem to be in charge of maintaining balance here. So what kind of beings are we talking about? Like, think about that for a minute. How can you maintain cycles on the earth, cycles in the cosmos? You're adhering to cycles. What are they? Well, I think it gets more into how Thoth describes in ancient Egyptian writings as some kind of a cycle master being. Okay, that's what he calls them. He calls them the cycle masters. Okay, and they're very powerful. They're not like some being that, just like can die and then disappears. They seem to almost be eternal. First of all, they seem to be eternal, and they seem to be like billions of years old. Okay. And it seems to be something where they came here to create some kind of an experience with celestial souls, beings like us, that can come here and have experiences that are in this perfectly balanced type of world, but also not only that but have an entire game woven into it. That's like, there's a game where our souls seem to be constantly governed and also watched and judged. I think the best word to do is judged. And based on that judgment, our own cycles are determined in our growth with spirituality and consciousness based on these laws and rules that seem to be woven. And let me give you an example. Let's say you are someone who is eats really healthy, it has a pretty good mindset, has learned a lot about the understandings of things around them. They're right on the edge of progressing to this higher place, but they're still having some issues in their life. Like they still can be mean, and they're not accepting of people. They have this trauma or this pain in their life that they haven't fully dealt with. That person will be stuck at that place energetically as long as until they deal with that. Who's governing that? I asked that question, who is governing us being able to unlock, to progress on this soul path? Well, in ancient tablets from Sumer throughout Mesopotamia, the Anuna call themselves the ordainers of destinies, and that they manage cycles basically here. And the more I wrap my head around that, I'm like, wait a minute. So what are they then? Well, they seem like we're essentially them, but in a way where we haven't figured out what we are. And that golden age of us figured out what we are. And then they unlocked it, and they reached that great potential. I think the potential of what our golden age ancestors achieved is beyond our comprehension. I think that's where all the great teachers like Buddha, Krishna, Jesus all came out of that knowledge of that. Okay. And they were the teachers that were scattered throughout the ages that are trying to teach mankind. No, remember what you used to know. Remember what you are. Don't be distracted by these illusions. Okay. I often think back on the yuga cycles about how ages have different determinations of sophistication and levels of consciousness associated with them. So the Kali Yuga ages are talked about how it's not just physical sophistication of technology that you would be an iron or a bronze age or a silver age or a gold age. I don't think it was just technology that would bring you there. I think it was mindsets. I think it was about how sophisticated and highly conscious that being became. But then it begs the question is, so beings can't become that highly conscious if they're in those other ages? Again, who's governing these ages? Why are these ages have like a conscious a limit where it seems like that's where consciousness is, and then it progresses in a different age? That's where I want people's mindset to go here, is that something is going on. We're part of some kind of a game, some kind of a conscious, spiritual, energetic game where it's very entertaining because, you know, we're like these angels that are here battling and killing each other and destroying the very world that is the very sanctuary that we're a part of. It's quite interesting to see it all unfold, but that is what I think they are. They're fractals of source. They're like creative fractals of source that seem to be part of something far greater than, and we're part of something far greater than we understand. And they seem to be governing the ages for us and spoon feeding us at times to help us. But Will, here's the big one. We were handed everything then, and that's why we achieved everything. I find it very interesting that they were destroyed and we were not. So they were handed everything and they lost it from these catastrophes. And then our primitive ancestors didn't understand it. And then we kind of lost it through information and destroying things, right? It's still there, but it's like in the background. It's like a shadow. It's still there. But what I mean is, based on what I've seen in tablets, I think there was an agreement made, because it's what it discusses, is that once we lost it, they would never give it to us again. We'd have to find it. I think that's what the game has become, that we're here now with all these distractions, tie-in technology, all these things that can separate us from nature and spirit, which I think that's really the core of this, is us realizing our balance with the earth and becoming part of the cycles of, again, becoming one with it, becoming in tune with those things. Okay. But I think that's the whole thing as well, is that we have to refine it all. See, that's what the game is, that we need to put those pieces back together to make our way back to what we once were. There's never going to be a savior again. I don't think that we collectively and even individually have reached the place yet where we're really allowed to use a lot of our creative abilities. Let me give you an example. I think that we have telekinesis abilities. We have levitating abilities. We have abilities to actually manifest. We have like actual magic with a K, like what Crowley was saying. And those whole groups, is that magic is real. But I think that it doesn't come from the same place that we think. Let me give you an example. I've noticed that the natural environment that you're a part of has a huge determination on what kind of like magic is available. Let me tell you what I mean by that. If you've ever gone to like a beautiful garden, like some sacred place that they've designed the water flowing just perfectly through little canals, and they've all very well maintained beautiful trees and flowers and bridges.
I'm sorry to disrupt this, because I can give people an image. Kodai Canal up in the mountains somewhere in India.
Exactly.
It's that. Okay.
When you go to those places, okay, and you sit down and you become one with it, and then you start to kind of create, something happens. Very different. There's like magic there. When I've studied the ancient sites, they talk all about the necessity of creating that kind of environment as unlocking like the magic of the earth and unlocking the magic of like ether, and how there's the world around us. We're supposed to be stewards here that are supposed to be designing this world to make it beautiful and pure, because they discuss these ancient cities and temples being in places that are pure places of energy on the earth. They talk about that a lot. Beautiful places near rivers where energetically the earth has energy, and it's very specific that it changes its state with the environment that you're in. If you go to a construction industrial area, if you go to northern New Jersey and you're like walking around where all the factories and stuff are, that's like the complete opposite of what we're talking about. Okay. Trash everywhere, bottles, like
Yeah.
sad, like people that are homeless. And like that is that in that energy is a big deal. I mean, a big deal. And I think one day in our world, we'll understand that the way we design it is we make it beautiful. Cities that are glass and stone, that have trees everywhere, that have gardens all around them. When you do that, you unlock an energy, like a magic. Okay. And I realized the importance of that is that our creative potentials here are severely limited by the environments that we cultivate. It seems like it shuts off that energy, that magic. It shuts it right off. And so as I'm here in the middle of the mountains of California in this quiet place full of peacocks and nature, you really see to unlock a different kind of energy. There's something else here and you feel it. And you start to, and then you go out of those environments and you go to those places that are trashy and dirty. And you're like, whoa, you can really feel it. You become in tune with it. And I think that was a big part of the ancient world, is that they would build these temples surrounded by gardens and surrounded by this energy, and they would unlock an energy that they could then tap into to reach these celestials and these higher places, where it was almost like the parameters needed would unlock it, and then it would be available. And then that bond that used to be here was destroyed, and we became sloppy. We became disrespectful. Look at what the dynastic Egyptians did. Recarved the ancient lion sphinx to be a stupid pharaoh head, disrespecting it, disrespecting the ancient gardens and the things, and they just disappeared into history.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think there's a big part of this is respect. You see in the temples that they would make offerings, not sacrifice offerings, like lapis lazuli and silver and different offerings to these temples to get the favor of the gods, the celestials. Something real was going on there. And I think that connection was severed long ago, and we don't have it anymore. And that's why we're just so disconnected with a bunch of children that have a bunch of guns and dangerous stuff. And they're like trying to take over what is really a sacred balance and order that has not been forgotten here. Will, it waits for the time when humanity is ready, and having us be governed as stepping stones to remember who we once were and get back to that. I think that's what it's really about.
I'm a very positive guy, an optimistic guy. I don't know where we're headed in the near future. I want to believe that we're going to get it, because I think in the end we will get it, because we have to, because it's just the fact that you have something inside of you that is greater than the material world.
Imagine if our world was different, where we had a very different type of way that we would go about our day, let's say. Okay? Very different structure to stuff. We won't get into economics right now or anything like that. I'm just simply saying, imagine if the world was beautifying everything. If everybody was part of beautifying our world and creating it in like sanctuaries and places, cleaning up all the trash, making things beautiful, the energy and the magic of our world would come to life. It's you know what it's like? It's like our Earth is a giant crystalline grid, right? Primarily quartz, silica. It's like a giant crystal. It's like it's offline. It's not online right now. It's like it's dormant, waiting, because all of the sanctuaries, all of the ancient temples, all the things built in these energetically important areas were destroyed or dismantled or don't exist anymore. And it's like that whole grid, that energy of the earth isn't functioning like it used to. It's hibernating. It's waiting. It's waiting where it can blossom. It's like a flower that hasn't opened up in thousands of years. That's waiting. That's waiting there to open. And we are the ones that are supposed to bloom that flower. See, the flower of the earth, blooming it, also blooms us. They go hand in hand together. Us understanding our deep, deep devotion and importance within nature is, I think, the most important of every single step that we can take here to reach a higher spiritual place. I think that's the core. I've determined that if you don't have that, you will always be limited no matter where you go.
Like you said, there's something to be said about making things beautiful around you. And I don't know if you're aware, and I'll butcher the study, but there was somewhere, I believe it was a place in India where they had high crime and other sorts of issues, maybe drugs. I don't know exactly. They just started to clean it up. by the act of cleaning up the area, it changed
Yes.
the people. Okay, we all know this. So if you walk into a house that looks like it has crap all over the floor, you throw your trash right next to all the other trash on the floor. If it looks pristine, you would feel weird. It's an inner thing, and it's also a social thing. But the real truth is that it starts from within. You don't walk into a pristine garden and just dump your trash in there. You would never do that. Why? Is it because you've been socialized to do that? Or is it because it feels energetically incorrect in every ounce of your body to do something like that?
Yeah, and let's add another level to this now, because we can tie right back to the ancients. What happens when you build a structure out of, let's say, metal or concrete or just something ugly, right?
Mm-hmm.
That structure is very different than, let's say, how about this? Walk up to, in New York City, go walk up to a bunch of those buildings in a kind of industrial feel, very metal and concrete. Feel that, and then go feel a beautiful old stone church or an old stone museum or with gardens around it. You will feel completely different energy around those structures. So in that case, you're not really like necessarily just focusing on nature there, but you're designing in a certain harmonic way that's changing the energy. So what are you doing? Well, the stone has a very different energy than the concrete does. So then what if you take the stone and you build it so it's all perfectly aligned with certain sacred geometry? Then you're unlocking something. The ancients, it's a two-pronged effect. They got it. It's the sanctuaries and beautification, and it's creating these beautiful stone megaliths that are all tightly fit together. Something to do with the tight fit has to do with the energy passing seamlessly. And then you create that structure of that unbelievably incredible stone masonry, and you build it in a certain spot with sanctuaries around it and gardens. What are you unlocking there? What's happening now? That's what they are understanding. They understood that, and that's what they were building. But they're all destroyed around the world, and we haven't cared to rebuild them or do what they did once again. That's my goal, if I could. And I'm Randall Carlson and I have been talking a lot about this. Is that he's trying to create like a mystery school, and I was saying, well, how about the both effect? How about we create mystery schools and sanctuaries all over the world, just like we used to back in the day? Because if you're going to be learning about mystery schools, you have to be in that sanctuary that is in that space energetically already. They go hand in hand. You might as well replace a mystery school with an ancient temple. They're the same thing. It's a place to teach and get into a higher state of consciousness in a pure way. And I think that is really that we need to stop acting like this is all hypothetical. We know, like you said, when are we going to like stop pretending? We already know, don't we?
What books did you read? What text did you understand? Where could someone go if they want to go on a crazy rabbit hole there?
Here, let's get some out.
And I see the 𝗂𝗂𝗋𝗋𝗋 behind you, which of course I know you and I both know well.
Okay, so I'm gonna show you a number of books that have lots of translations in them. They have a lot of these stories with them, and of course, don't forget my books as well. In particular, I'll just mention these as well. These two books contain a lot of these translations that we're speaking about. Some of the best parts of them, if you wanted to have a more condensed version of understanding. The Epic of Humanity, co-written with Billy Carson and I, just came out recently. And that has a lot of ancient texts within it, as well as my previous books, The Stage of Time. And the new one I'm writing have a lot of those ancient texts within them from the best translators in the world. And I want to show you who those are first, and so people get an idea. So it's not just throwing out different things. Number one, I would be highly critical of anybody who's reading Zecharia Sitchin. I would just be very cautious of that. Those are not.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
I know that there's something. I've never gone down that rabbit hole. I don't know. All I see when you're in the superficial place is that there's some people. Oh, you have to read Zecharia Sitchin or what? Could you just give me an understanding of why?
When Sumerian was discovered, when the 𝗪𝗟𝗋𝗄𝗋 library was the first thing ever found that connected all of these tablets in the story, it was found in 1849 by a man named Austin Henry Layard. And he discovered all these mysterious cuneiform, it's a wedge-like writing. No one knew how to read it. Nobody that was existing in the world, including indigenous people, had no way of reading it or translating it. It was a dead language. Sumerian is a language isolate, meaning it wasn't shared with any other languages in the world. And it took 15 years of an Assyriologist that was an expert named George Smith. He's a legendary hero. You can see I have all these bookmarks in it. He's a legendary hero of our world that has not been credited. Okay. He is a legend. He was the first man in history to study and crack an ancient code that nobody had cracked. He figured out how to read Sumerian by backtracking and associations found with Assyrian and Akkadian. That's how he ended up finding it, because they're not the same language, but they share some slight similarities. And he ended up cracking the code for this language. And so he went on to write this book, which included all the translations for like the Epic of Gilgamesh and the 𝗪𝗟𝗪𝗂 and Eridu-Genesis and Myth of Adapa and Legend of 𝗪𝗟𝗪𝗀 and all of these ancient tablets. Zechariah Sitchin came long time later. He came in like the 1980s, I think. And he was not an Assyriologist. He did not know how to read Sumerian, was not a linguistic expert. And he wrote a whole series of books that supposedly is translations of all these cuneiform tablets and the stories within them. Now, what I found when I actually started studying the experts, like here's another one, Samuel Noah Kramer, one of the greatest Assyriologist experts in the world. You read the original translations from them. Here's another book he did, Samuel Kramer. These are all the core of the best translators in the world. Here's one more, Leonard Woolley, who came along and looked at all the tablets, cross-confirmed with each other, being experts that knew how to translate and read these things, and then laid out what the tablets say. Okay. Now, in these cases, these experts all agree with the translations to like a 95% area. All of them do. However, Zechariah Sitchin, what he said, I would guess, if I was to base it on, I know this is going to upset some people, but it's just the truth, is that I found around 80% inaccuracies with Zechariah Sitchin.
80% of what he has said is false, essentially,
yes.
In your
it's
wow.
Completely taken out of context from the tablets. They do not say anything about slaves or gold mining. There's nothing ever mentioned about gold mining, first of all, ever.
Really?
Yep.
That's a big thing online. So there's no gold mining from the Anunnaki coming down to do that stuff.
There's nothing ever mentioned with gold. The only time gold is ever mentioned in any tablet is it's mentioned in Enki in the World Order as being brought for homage to temples for with lapis lazuli, gold, and silver. They mentioned as being important energetically for temples, and they talk about how it's being brought to a temple called the Temple of Nibiru, which is where the term Nibiru, the Zechariah Sitchin, came from. It's not a planet. It was a temple. It was actually part of the Akur for Enlil's mountain house. And his temple was called the Temple of Nibiru. And it was a temple dedicated to him. And it referred to the crossing, which was referred to the cross, which is really, really interesting how you go in and you find out that there was a famous Sumerian king named, that had the actual first Assyrian king that had the first cross called 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗪. And 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪 is the first Assyrian that had the same cross from Ayanis. I digress. But what I'm basically saying is these experts cracked a code and they all confirmed each other, right? George Smith, Stephanie Dalley, Samuel Kramer, and a few others have confirmed all these translations. And I put them together in these books and organized them and have studied them for like over 12 years on every detail. Like, for instance, you can read the 𝗪𝗟𝗪𝗂, a Sumerian version, and find out that there's also like a Babylonian version, same as the Enuma Elish. There's different versions of them. But what you ultimately have to do is go back to the original version of it to find out what the real story was. The Babylonians changed some stuff around because they wanted to seem greater than the Sumerians. That's a whole nother story we can talk about. But the point I'm trying to make is all of these tablets discuss all of this. There's like 6 different tablets that mention the ordainers of destinies, including like the 𝗪𝗟𝗔 and 𝗪𝗪𝗔 and all of these. They talk all about the ordainers of destinies in them. And all these other terms that are like very, very mysterious and very strange and enigmatic, that takes someone like an entire lifetime to try to understand, what they were trying to say in them. And I think that's one of the reasons why the tablets have been so misunderstood, as either being from the academic world as being myths, or in the other extreme end as being everything taken literally, when there's a lot of different allegorical aspects to them, but then woven into real cities, real kings and priests, and then events as part of journeys that either have to do with a metaphysical understanding or something kind of like celestial with constellations. It was like it was written for very specific sages and initiates, and then everyone else is like, I don't understand. I don't get it. And I think that was on purpose. Like you said, it seemed like, think about that quote, with great power comes great responsibility. You wouldn't want to just hand the keys to everybody, right?
Of course. Yeah. It doesn't work like that. Just like you would just take a kid and hand them the keys to a car. You can't do that, right? You show that you can do something, and then we slowly, and so it looks like that's the route that we're on. It looks as if we have to continue to do this. We need to get more people, have an understanding of it, start to work towards that inner power and inner understanding. And then, okay, once we're there, once they feel we've got enough, boom, you can unleash that. Here you go. You got the keys to the car. Go wherever you want to.
Exactly.
And I hope that's it. I feel like we're going to get there. The last thing that I was going to ask was a personal one.
Sure.
Meaning, you have all of this. You have all this knowledge. You're reading and studying all these things. What does the MatthewLaCroix morning routine look like? Do you wake up with, like, you have your false doorways that you walk through once you have your coffee and then the sun's shining through? How does it work?
Every morning, I like to sit outside for 20 minutes, at least 20 minutes. I live in a beautiful place, very quiet, and I like to plan out and go over how I want my day to go. Like, what do I want to accomplish? Like, what feels good that day? What kind of work do I want to get done? What's important to do? And I like to organize my thoughts and just kind of release, kind of take a deep breath and just feel like the day. Don't go in hectic. Don't go in stressed. Don't go in feeling like that, because that's the energy that's then going to translate to your whole rest of your day. Start the day by having a peaceful moment where you can organize your thoughts a little bit, and then go take it in stages. My day would be something like work for a while and then go take a walk. Go take a walk or something, relax for a minute, catch up on things that need to get done, and then basically structure your day of creativity and getting work done, with breaking it up with moments of somewhere quiet, somewhere nice you can take. If you live in a city or something, find your little place. There's always somewhere little you can find, some coffee shop, some little place you can go that has good energy that you like. Find your little sanctuaries and use them, because when we get so taken off track and into this material illusion, like the Gnostics called it, and we get thrown into work, make tons and tons of money, get everything, you like run around with your head cut off, be all stressed, you're disconnecting yourself from that other place, that place of creativity and that place of being more connected. And I know I actually am very encouraged to see a world becoming a little bit more automated, because I think people need to stop doing some of the remedial tasks that they're doing, and we need to be more creative. We're not there yet. People have to pay bills, and we're in a place it's challenging, but we'll get there to where we can have a more optimal environment for growth and for people being happy. I mean, look at the United States. We might be one of the most well-off financially, but we're literally some of the most unhappy people on the planet, bar none, right? You look at some little tiny Swiss town or some little town like literally in the middle of nowhere where there's like farming community. Like, they're usually more happy than we are. I think that really takes a lot into consideration with what really makes happiness and what really makes us fulfilled and makes us feel connected.
Mm-hmm. Very well said, Mr. MatthewLaCroix. As always, we'll link to everything. I don't even have to list it, but if there's any place you want specifically, guys, to go to, maybe just let us know.
Check out, obviously, so August, we're going to be embarking on the big filming, big expedition with some big names in that I haven't even announced all of them yet. And that'll be part of the filming in Turkey, in Menorca, and then in Peru and Bolivia. And we'll be joined by lots of experts along the way. And we are still looking if anybody wants to help contribute toward that or towards that or be a part of it. It's quite an incredible sequence of different trips that are coming together that are only going to blossom into others as we go along. But if you want to follow that, it's thestageoftime.com. And you can also check out updates on my YouTube channel, MatthewLaCroix, for all the exciting stuff. We're going to be putting up a whole bunch of new videos. I just put some up from Turkey, but we're going to be doing more in the future. And of course, get ready for a lot of very, very important and narrative changing expeditions in the future.
Okay. Awesome stuff. Guys, we'll link to everything. Of course, Matt, we'll see you soon, it looks like.
Thanks, Will, and thanks, everybody. Till next time.